Hi everyone, welcome back to another Scriptcase tutorial. My name is Nate Carpenter and I'm the Scriptcase instructor leading this video tutorial. So in this video we're going to look at integrating PayPal with Scriptcase. So this can provide some really useful functionality to integrate payments into your Scriptcase applications. So I hope this is helpful for you. Let's go ahead and look at our agenda for what we're going to get through on this. So first we're going to look at the overview of the PayPal API process and how we're going to implement that ourselves in Scriptcase. So I've got some graphs and charts to show you how we're going to do that, and then we're going to go ahead and do that. And then we're going to introduce the developer paypal.com so we can get test credentials and show you where you can get documentation on this as well. Then we're going to go ahead and set up the applications and test it out. So here's the components that we have. We have 3 grid applications that we're going to be using, and then 1 editable form application. We're also going to be using the SC Web Service API for PayPal Express and then curl to get the results of the transaction, and then a good amount of PHP programming. So this is a more complicated one. There's a lot going on in this one. So I've gone ahead and mocked up some kind of flowcharts and things so I can kind of show you a big picture overview of what's going on with all the different pieces in this before we actually start developing. So let's go over to that and let's see more of how this is going to work. Okay, so here's an initial overview. So as you can see up on the top half, this is the PayPal process. This is the process for interacting with their API. And then down below is how we're going to integrate that API in Scriptcase. So as you can see, the PayPal process is really just 3 parts. And I've got it in green, yellow, and red here. So we're going to collect the order data and send it to PayPal to initiate the transaction. And then the user here can then complete the transaction using their PayPal account, any payment methods they have attached with that, or a guest checkout through PayPal. And that's the most complicated part, handling all the credit card information, but we don't have to do anything with that really. That's all handled by PayPal, so we just got to redirect them to the PayPal website, and then they come back all done with that step. So we don't have to worry about that. And then at the end, you can collect the details on the transaction, determine if it was a success and how they paid and all that information. So here's how we're going to integrate that down below. So for collecting the order data, we have 2 steps. We have step 1 and step 2. We're going to look at those in a second. And then we don't have to do anything here on the grayed out area for completing the actual transaction. And then on step 3, we have, we'll collect the information. So I've got the applications broken out into step 1, 2, and 3. So the first part here in green is collect order data and send it to PayPal. So here's all the pieces for that. So as you can see here, I have the database tables. So the main one here is products. That comes from the Scriptcase samples library. It's just going to have the information about our products in there. Then over here, we have our PayPal transactions table. So this is going to be our master table for all of our transactions. Every time we initiate a transaction, we'll go ahead and put it in there, and we can track the status and the grand total of it. And then associated with that is the transactions products table. So that's going to be all the products that are associated with each transaction. So each one that the user adds to the transaction will get added here as another record. So then on step 1 here in the blue, we have a grid PayPal step 1 application. And I'm going to show you that in a second, and we've set it up and finished getting it to work. That's going to be populated from the products table. It's going to list all the products, and then it's going to allow the users to select a product. And that's going to be on a button to collect all those, and then it's going to redirect to the form to pay with PayPal. So over here, it redirects to this form, step 2 in the orange here. So this is going to be populated from the transactions product. So it's going to have all the different products that the user added. And then the user can go through and edit the quantities or delete products as they want. And then there's another button on that form that's going to go through, figure out all the changes that are made, collect it, build up the requests to PayPal, send the transaction to PayPal, and then redirect the user to PayPal. So then the user is going to complete the transaction on their own. We don't have to worry about that. And we can move on to the third and final step once they come back. So it's going to redirect back to whatever application we want. And that's what's going to be handled on this third step here in the red, collect details, and on the finished transaction here. So we've got our 2 tables still, PayPal transactions and PayPal transactions products here. So we're going to be using those. And we've got our third step. And we've got some code in this grid PayPal step 3. And there's going to be a nested grid on that as well. That's going to be populated from the product. So we're going to have the master transactions, just one transaction that's going to be shown on this grid at a time. And then all the products associated with that in a nested grid over here. So step 3 nested. So there's 2 grids for step 3, but they're going to be shown as one in a nested setup here. So then on the main grid, we've got some code that's going to use a token and some different information to curl PayPal again and get the results of that transaction that it was redirected from. And then with that, we can update the status and all that information, and we can display kind of a final page to the user. So that's kind of a bird's eye overview of everything that's going to be going on and all the pieces in this process. So now let's go over the Scriptcase and PayPal Developer API and get started with actually developing this. Okay, so here we are at the developer.paypal.com. So that's the URL you want to go to when you have to create an account, and you can get some documentation about the API and everything, some different types of APIs that they reuse. But we're just going to go ahead and log into our dashboard here. And as you can see, I have some test credentials. I don't want to log in with those, but we're going to use those later. So let me log in my main account. You can sign up if you don't have one. I'm just going to log in here, wait for this to come around. And as you can see here, there's some different information about your developer account. We're going to be using Express Checkout, which integrates with PayPal. We want to go over here to one of these options here on the left. There's many different options that you can see where we want to go to Sandbox and Accounts. So if we go to Sandbox and Accounts, we can see our accounts for testing. So these are the accounts we're going to use to do some different tests on there. So as you can see, we have 2 different accounts. We have a personal one and a business one, and you could create more if you wanted. The business is going to be you. That's going to be the merchant making the sale. And then the personal one is going to be the customer, the person buying something. So if we view and edit this one, we can see the credentials for this. So it's going to pop up something here. See name and then the email ID and then the password as well. So we're going to be using those to log in and test our system to see if it works as a customer. And then here's the funding sources. So there's a bank account, a credit card, and a PayPal balance that we can use to pay. So that's just some dummy funding sources, and then some other settings here as well. And then if we go to business here, we can see our test business account. So go ahead and run that. And so same type of information, first name, last name, email, password, etc., phone number, all that. But we also have these API credentials here. And that's going to be useful. This is what we're going to be using to talk to the PayPal API. We're going to need that username, that password, as well as that signature there. All 3 of those we're going to use over in Scriptcase to interact with the API. That's going to authenticate us to the API. So that's our API credentials set up for that, and we're going to be using those a lot in Scriptcase. So there's our different accounts. We're going to be using those. I've already got some code using that information, but now you know where to get it. So here in Scriptcase, I've got 4 applications set up. Step 1, 2, and 3, just like I showed you in our overview. So 2 steps for step 3, 2 applications for step 3, and then there's step 1. Let's go ahead and get started with that. So this is just a basic grid application. There's nothing too fancy about it, except I did put the infinite scroll option on there so we don't get any pagination, but that's completely optional. So as you can see, just a basic application. And if I scroll down, you can see all of our products here. So these are all the products that the user can select here. And then we're going to add a button on this to go ahead and allow the user to select it. So I'm going to go to Buttons and New Button. I'm going to name this Checkout, like so. And we're going to make it look nice. The type is going to be a run. That's very important. And I'll show you what that means if you don't know in a second. So we create the button here. And let's go ahead and run this so we can see what this does to our application. So as you can see here, put the button up there, but now we have a checkbox next to each and every item there. So we can check that, and we can uncheck them as well. So if we don't check any and we click checkout, it's going to tell us to select some. And then if we do that, it's going to come around and not do anything because we haven't done any code yet. So now let's go over to Scriptcase and start adding some code for that button there. So as you can see, we have a code section, and we have the on record and the on finish if we select this drop down. So the on record is going to run for each and every record that the user selects here. And then the on finish, if we select that, that's going to run at the end when it's done all of that. So on record, if I type something in here and saved it, and then I move to on finish, it's going to show a different chunk of code. So you can see that those are 2 different blocks of code there that you can edit. Now let's edit the style of this. We can change the class to PayPal here, make it look a little bit nicer, and then we can also add a font awesome icon that looks like PayPal here. So if I type it in, got a couple different PayPal icons. Let's do this one. So that's going to make that button look really nice, and there's a text for that. We could do a hint or a confirmation button there, and then we're going to open it up in a modal here. So set the width and height of the modal to make it look good for the size. So now we can go ahead and copy in some code. So let me delete this test here, and let me copy in some code, and then I'm going to walk you through of how I use this. So let me grab the code and copy it in here. Okay. So here's our code. Let's go ahead and walk through this. So we have a global variable here. We're going to set that up in a second here. But basically that's going to keep track of our transaction ID. So if it's not set, then we need to create it. So we do that by inserting into our PayPal transactions table there with the status of started. Then we select our last insert. There's an auto increment on that table. And we set that to our global tran ID variable. And then we're going to get all of our products here and put it in an array. So another global variable we're going to set up. And each one of those is going to equal an array of the product ID, the transaction ID, the quantity, which is just going to be 1, and the price, which is going to come over there from our table. So that's those fields there, plus the quantity, which is just going to be set to 1, and then we'll allow the user to edit it later. And then we're going to increment the global total by the unit price, so that it is correct for each product there. So now let me grab some more code that we're going to do after it processes all this. So this is on the on finish. Let me copy that in here. And we're going to loop through all those products and build that up initially. So we have a value delim and a vals table there, and we're going to build up an insert command here for SQL. So we're going to, for each of those products, we're going to implode that as a value set for our insert command there. So if you're familiar with MySQL insert commands, you can insert multiple records for the values for the fields that you set up. So for value delim, that's going to separate them by a colon there, or by a comma, I mean. And so we're going to insert all those fields with the values that we built up in that string there in that loop. So then we're going to go ahead and update our PayPal transactions, our master table, with the global total of everything and a new status of products added for that transaction ID there. We're going to execute that, and then we're going to go ahead and redirect to our form application here. So this is just a placeholder name, and we're going to pass through that transaction ID. So this is a placeholder name, but that's going to be our step 2 form that I showed you in our overview. So that's that form right there, step 2. So let me go ahead and copy that name and paste it in here so that it will redirect it to the correct application. So now we need to set up all these global variables, and to do that we need to go to the onApplicationInit event when the application first runs. So let me copy some code that initializes those variables, and I'm going to go ahead and go to events here, and events right there, there we go, and then onApplicationInit, and yes, we do want to save, and then I'm just going to copy that in. So our products is an array, and then our total order and our transaction ID, so then we can use those down in our button, and it's all set up and ready to go. If we go to application and global variable, we can set these as output variables so it doesn't ask for them when we initially run the application. So now we can run this, and this should work as is, and we can get started with step 2. So as you can see, there's our button, looks a little bit nicer. Let's go ahead and select a couple products here, and then click checkout. And there it's redirected to our step 2 for those 2 products. So now let's go over to that form and look at what that looks for and get that all set up there. So this is an editable grid form. So let's go ahead and go over there and look at that. So let me go over to Scriptcase again and open up that form application that I have set up. So again, just a basic editable grid form, set an editable grid initial settings there so that the user can edit those. And I've made all the fields read-only except the quantity field. If I go to the SQL, I've limited it with a where clause right here on the transaction ID. So that's the ID for the transaction, and I've limited it to that variable that we passed in over in the grid. So if I go back to the grid and go down to our button, and then on the onFinish, you can see when we redirect there, we set that transaction ID equal to our global transaction ID that we created. So that way, we're only looking at the products for one transaction. So that's pretty much everything that is special about this grid. So now we can start adding some code to go ahead and send the transaction to Scriptcase. So the first thing we need to be able to do is track when the user changes the quantity. So as you can see, we can edit the quantity field here and then go ahead and save those records. And when that happens, we need to update the table, which Scriptcase will do automatically. But we need to also update the grand total on the transactions, the master transactions there. So to do that, in the on the events table, in the events section there, we need to edit the on after update event. So that's this event right here, on after update. And we're going to put some code in there to go ahead and update the master transactions table with the sum of the unit price times the quantity there. So there we have the sum of price times quantity for the PayPal transactions products there. We're going to pull that out, and the total is going to equal that for the transaction ID. So we're limiting it by the transaction ID, and we're updating the master PayPal transactions table. So then we just go ahead and execute that, and we are ready to go. So that's that first little bit of code. That's pretty easy, pretty simple. But then we need to add a button now to go ahead and build up this transaction and send it to PayPal. So we're going to go ahead and create a button just like we did on the grid pretty much. But this time it's just going to be a regular PHP button. So let me go ahead and call that PayPal, pay with PayPal or something like that. Yeah, let's do pay with PayPal like so. This is going to be a PHP button. Go ahead and create that here. And then we can make the CSS style PayPal just like on the other one and put in our font awesome icon to make it look nice just like on the other one. And then we should be good to go. So go ahead and save that and we can start editing the code here. So down here, just one single code block. We don't have multiple code blocks here. So if I go ahead and run this, you can see this button show up on that modal there. So it's asking for the transaction ID. I have a dummy record I'm going to put in here. And so there's our quantity, so that's going to be updated, and there's our Pay with PayPal button that the user can click. So we're going to go ahead and get everything for that transaction ID. We're going to get all those products that were added to the table for that transaction ID, and we're going to go ahead and add those to our transaction. So that's our first step there. We're getting the total from our master table. That's that total value, so we have our grand total for that transaction ID. And then we also are getting all of our products here. So product name, quantity, and price from our transactions products table. And then we're also joining to the products table to get the name from that as well. So that's where we're getting that product name, is from the products table there. So that way we have a nice clean name that we can pass through to Scriptcase. We're going to look that up, and then we're going to go ahead and build an array here, and then we could also sum all those, do a subtotal for all those products too if we wanted to. We're not going to do that in this iteration here. So in our products table, products array here, we're going to add subarrays here, kind of building that back up from what we had before with the name, the quantity, which this time is going to come from the table, and then also the price, which will come from the table as well. And then product sum, we could build that up here, but we're not going to use that for this iteration, but you could use that to double check your grand total as well to make sure it is correct. So now we're going to add in some code to actually interact with the API. So we need to add in our settings here. So this gateway is PayPal Express. That's the gateway for Scriptcase PayPal integration. Our username and our password, which both come from the PayPal API that I showed you at the beginning, and our signature as well. And then we are going to be in test mode, so we set that equal to true. And then we're going to use the call API there with our settings there, and that's going to hand us back a gateway. So this is a SOAP API, so it's a little bit more complicated than a REST API, which you might be more used to. We're not just making calls to a URL. We also have a code on this end that Scriptcase has implemented for us to be able to interact with the API. So with that, on that gateway that we get back, we need to call a purchase method. And on that, we need to set the cancel URL as well as the return URL. So that's going to go back to our step 3. So I've got another line here that's going to use that. So we're going to get the current application name and the current URL. And in that, we're going to replace that. So that's that PayPal step 2 right there. We're going to replace that with our grid PayPal step 3. So that's our step 3 grid over there. that's where it's going to redirect to on both a cancel and on a successful return down here. So we pass that through to PayPal, and then PayPal knows where to go when it's done. And we also have those options of aborted or return. And then the order is going to be the transaction ID there. And then also a date if we want to use that to check it as well. Then the amount is going to be our grand total. That's going to be everything added up that we pulled from that table there. Currency is going to be USD, and then items is going to be our products array right here. So that's just going to be an array there. We can pass that through, and Scriptcase has it all figured out. And then we send that, another method here on that gateway object. We're going to go ahead and send that to PayPal. So we don't need to worry about any logic of calling that. That's all implemented on the Scriptcase side of things for us. So then, once we send it, we're going to get a response. It's either going to be a redirect or it's going to be an error. If it is a redirect, then we're going to update our master table with the new status of redirected to PayPal, execute that, and then we're going to actually redirect there. So response redirect, that's going to be a method that's going to kick us around to PayPal so that the user can do that. Otherwise, we will get the error message and display that. So that should be all set up now, and that will allow us to go ahead and send the user to PayPal to start actually doing the transaction, the hard part that we don't have to do. So now let's run our step 1 and test this all the way through to PayPal now. So this should allow us to actually do a full transaction at this point. So click checkout. We can adjust our quantities if we want to, and then we can go ahead and click pay with PayPal. And that's going to go ahead and take over the screen here. It's probably actually PayPal is going to take over the parent as well. But let's enter in our test personal account there. So that's our other account that we got from the API. And I think it's going to take over the screen here in a second. Yeah, so we're going to change that in a second so it doesn't open in the modal, open in a new window. But there's all of our payment methods that we saw over there in the API with the balance, a credit card, or a bank account there. So we could select whichever one we want to make this transaction here, and then click Pay Now. So this is all handled on PayPal. Don't have to worry about it. And then it kicks us around to step 3 here. So now we can go ahead and finish step 3. So this is our step 3 grid. And this one has a lot more going on with the UI side of things. So let's go ahead and open this and see how I set this up to work. And then we can add the code to get this. So as you can see, we have our nested grid with products, then our master grid showing the transactions, as well as an area to show the results. So I'm going to open both of those grids there, the main one and the nested one. And let's start with the nested one. This one's most simple, just a basic grid, except on the SQL. Just like on the form application, I put a where on there to limit the transactions ID. So it's pulling from the transactions products. And just like over here on the grid where I added that where, right there, limiting it by the transactions ID, I'm doing the same thing here on this grid so that it's only showing the products for that one transaction. And we're going to get that from the PayPal callback. I'll show you that in a second. So I've got our product ID. That's going to be pulling from the products table to get the product name there so that it's populated there with the name as opposed to just an ID value. So it's just a lookup setting on that. Pretty simple in Scriptcase there. And that should be pretty much everything with this grid. So it's a pretty basic nested grid. And then over here in our main grid, we're limiting the SQL just like before on our other applications there, except ID this time. That's going to be our transactions ID. So that's going to show us only one record on this grid here. And as you can see, that status there, we're getting that from the URL. Well, we're not getting that from the URL. We're going to get that from the URL, but right now we're just getting it from the table. And then we also have that token that we're going to use that's going to identify our transaction over in PayPal. So that when we can talk to PayPal, it knows which transaction there. So on this grid module, we also have it in slide orientation. And that's what makes it kind of go across and make it look really nice like this for just one record. So that's where that comes from. And then we also have a nested grid here with products as well as this field here. So we have 3 different blocks for the nested grid, the main fields, and the results. So if you go to layouts blocks, I've got 3 blocks here. I added those and put the labels on them, 1, 2, and 3. And then on some of them I'm displaying the title, some of them I'm not displaying the label. And then they're all going to be below each other. And then they're all 100% width since they're taking over the entire width of the screen. like so. And then in this one, this middle one here, I have 2 columns so that they're side by side. So that's that one there, and I just set it equal to 2 columns to get those 2 columns side by side. So that's pretty much everything with blocks, and then I just went ahead and put the correct fields in the correct blocks with the labels and everything as well. So yeah, let's go over and see where I put those fields. If I go to Edit Fields, you can see I put each of those fields then in the correct block there, and then ID I'm not showing at all since I don't need to worry about that. And then I went ahead and nested the products grid there. So there I just nested it. I just linked it to our grid 3 nested right there on the transaction ID equals the ID from our table, our main table there. So that's what's put that nested grid in there and makes it look like it's part of that. So now we're going to go ahead and do some processing based on when those parameters are passed to the URL, and we can display the results of it down there. So to do that, we need to go to the events and go ahead and get that order number as well as that return there. So the first thing we need to do is set the ID equal to the transaction ID. So we need to get that out of the URL so that we have a valid transaction there. So let me copy in some code, and we're going to go to the on application init there. This is going to process before the SQL is processed there, before the select. So if I go ahead and get the PayPal value there out of there, so there's that PayPal value right there. And we're going to go ahead and get that out of the URL using the get method there. And we're going to get the order ID out of that one. And so that's going to be that number, that order ID, which equals 35. So it's a little bit hard to see. And we're going to set that main variable there to the order ID that we get out of there. So that's going to set it for our SQL and then set it over there as well. So then we're all ready to go, and we can go ahead and interact with the API again to get the results. So we're going to do that on the on record. Again, checking if the PayPal is set, and then we're going to go ahead and get the information based on that token as well. So we're looking at if the PayPal is set there, and if that value is set in there, then we can go ahead and call PayPal here. So if you remember over here, we were using those credentials here. We're going to use the same credentials, and we're looking at whether it was aborted or returned. So if it's aborted, we just need to display an error that it was aborted and the status and everything so that we know it wasn't completed. So if that PayPal variable is aborted, we set the status, that's that status field right over there, to aborted. And then the result is the transaction has been aborted there. So then that should be ready to go, and then we just update our transactions table to a status of aborted. Otherwise, we assume that it was not aborted, and we can go ahead and do our logic to interact and get the results from the API there. So let me copy in some code there in an else block for that if. So let me grab that code here and put it in right there. So the first thing we're doing here is we're calling the API. So we're just going to save that real quick here so that it's ready to go. And we're going to call the API in much the same way. So let me clean up the formatting here. So this is PayPal as return, and the token is there. That's that token over there on that URL. We're going to need that token to talk to the PayPal API, as I said before. And we're going to update the transactions there to a completed status since we know this is done and it was a return, it wasn't aborted or anything. And so then we're setting our username, password, signature, URL, just like before, except we are setting a URL this time. We did not set that last time. So that's a new value. But that's because we are going to curl the API this time. So this time we're just sending it that version, the method, and the username, password, signature, and then also the token down here. So there's the method there that's going to be PayPal Express checkout details. And then the token, which comes from that URL again, right there. That's where it's going to be. And then we just build up all those params into a query, a properly formatted query. And then we're going to use the SC web service, and we're going to use curl this time, not the API. And we're just sending a curl with all those options passed in. And then that should be all we need. And then we can just get the response from that and use that and parse it now. So let me copy in some more code so that we can parse that response and make sure everything is good, and then also output it to the screen. So let me go ahead and put that in here. Let me put some spacing in there, make it look a little bit nicer. So there's that response. So we're going to make sure it's not empty first. And if it is not, we're going to explode it on the ampersand character. And then that's going to give us a nice big array of all of our options here. So we can go through those and decode them all. And we're going to get the value out and just save it in an array so that we have a key value array, an associative array there. That's really nice and easy to traverse and pull values out of if we wanted to check that and do some more authentication on it. And as long as there is a token in that array, an ACK, as well as a success message there, and the token equals our token, then we can go ahead and loop through all of that and save it to our results field on screen. So that's that last field on screen that we haven't put anything in yet. And we're just going to format it nicely so that we can see keys and values and put some new lines after it to make it look nice on screen. But that's entirely optional. You probably wouldn't do this in an actual integration. This is just so we can see it. So now this should be ready to go. We can go ahead and generate this code so that it is callable when we use it from our other applications. So now we can go all the way back to our step 1 grid, go ahead and run that, and run this start to finish. So select our products. I'm going to select a couple products here, and then go ahead and click checkout. Pop up that modal, click pay with PayPal. We can adjust our quantities. I'm going to leave them as defaults for now. I'll show you in a minute how to do that. But we can go ahead and click pay with PayPal. It's going to take over that screen here, and we still need to change that. We'll do that right after this. Change this so it doesn't pop up in the same window. Choose our payment method, and then go ahead and click pay now. And now it should kick us back to our grid, and there it is. There's our results info right there. And it is a status of completed, as you can see. And then you have all this information here to debug and make sure everything happened correctly if you wanted to see that. So that's all of that there. So a lot of different values there that you could look through and see everything that went on. Let's go ahead and change that button there on the form, the checkout pay with PayPal button there, and make that open in a different window instead of the same window. So we just change the target, and that way it won't look kind of weird with PayPal. Let's go ahead and walk through this one more time so that we can see that in action and also see adjusting the quantities in action too. So select a couple products again, click checkout, and we can go ahead and adjust the quantity here. Let me change this to 2, and then we go ahead and click save on that. So that's all modified, and then we can click pay with PayPal. And as you can see, it opened in a new window. So the form is still there, but this is a new window. And just as before, we can choose our payment method. Let's choose a credit card this time. And then go ahead and click pay now. And there it is. So just as before, but as you can see, we have the different quantities and a different total amount with that as well. So that's how you can integrate PayPal in Scriptcase. Provides a lot of useful functionality for you, but it's a little bit more complicated. So I hope this video helps you understand the processes that are needed to do it. I'll see you in the next tutorials.